Well, another week of scrimmages are in the books for the Arkansas Razorbacks baseball team. We got 3 of them this weekend, so there's plenty to get into, plenty to talk about. We're going to recap each of those scrimmages here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast today. And then at the end of the show, we will be taking a closer look at this Razorback pitching staff and assessing where some roles go, where some guys might shake out, and just an overall feel for the group. All that and more on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, the fall season is just kind of starting to fly by, folks. We're now 3 weeks in, and this week, like I said, we had 3 scrimmages, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is felt to me like a legitimate SEC weekend of baseball. So it was really good to see, a lot to observe. They went, I believe, 7 innings in each of the scrimmages, so 21 innings. And like I said, 3 weeks into fall ball. So now I feel like we have at least a legitimate sample size. Nothing crazy, nothing you're going to like live and die by. But, you know, we've got stats from some of these scrimmages and some guys are starting to emerge. And so I feel like at this point, we've seen enough to start to have some early takes on some of these guys. And so I do want to start, before I get into the scrimmage rundowns, I do want to say that nothing this past weekend there were no big picture takeaways, especially from the position player standpoint, to where I'm like, oh, I got to come here and tell you guys about this. A lot of guys did a lot of good things. I mean, there are 3 games, 21 scrimmages, ton of at-bats. So just about everybody had their fair share of ups and downs throughout the weekend. But if you feel like I'm not covering certain players or just not talking about certain guys enough, I'm open to hear that. So leave a comment, reach out to me on Twitter, reach out to me on Discord, wherever the case may be. If you want to hear more about certain guys, I'm perfectly fine to do that. I know on a couple weeks ago, we kind of did a tentative lineup projection and sort of where things stand at each position. So if you missed that, make sure you check that out here on the Locked On Razorbacks channel, whether you're listening on podcast, YouTube, whatever. So we talked a little bit more about the position players last week, but I feel like a lot of people were asking about pitching. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the pitching hierarchy, so to speak, on later in today's show. But I did just want to touch on these first 3 scrimmages here and give a quick little general rundown of each. So I take stats at all these games. I'm usually kind of doing a little bit of a play-by-play myself. And one thing I really just don't do is keep score. Like, I could not tell you the score to any of these 3 scrimmages, to which I literally wrote down play-by-play. And I realized this when I sent my play-by-play to Andrew Hutchinson, a fellow friend of mine who's also on the beat, also loves baseball, also likes to keep up with this stuff. And he was like, oh, well, like, do you have any like RBI or like runs and all that? I'm like, no, I don't have any of that. I just write down what happens in the at-bats. Cause like, I think you guys would agree that like, you don't care if the red team beat the gray team or if the gray team did this or whatever. The score doesn't really matter. It's about the individuals, what they do, and just sort of the developments you see as you're getting closer and closer to the season. And we're still a good bit of ways away, but still a lot of action going on with the Arkansas baseball team. So scrimmage 1, we started out on Friday. It's a little warm. I sat right behind home plate with a couple buddies, and we were sweating by the end of it. But Zach Root, the transfer from ECU, the left-handed guy who's wearing number 33, the Hagen Smith comp and all that, he and Gabe Gackle were the starting pitchers in the first scrimmage. They each went about 2 innings. I believe Root gave up 1 run. Gackle was really solid. He only had, I believe, 1 strikeout, and it was a 3-pitch strikeout. And he looked good doing it. He threw a lot of strikes, so not like a crazy vintage Gabe Gackle game where he just struck out the side twice or anything like that. But he's now thrown 3 scoreless innings since his first scrimmage where he gave up the 3 home runs, which we talked about a good bit. But Zach Root, who I felt like kind of struggled last week, looked a lot better this week. Now his velocity was down. I should mention this. I was sitting, again, behind home plate, and there were scouts kind of in that area. And there's always a ton of scouts at these games, which is always cool. Root's velo was more in like the 89, 91 range consistently, which is substantially lower than like where he averaged last year. And he was up as high as 96 coming from the left side last year. So again, it's September, and he was only throwing 2 innings here. I'm sure he's not max efforting it out here in the middle of fall practice. Not like he has anything he needs to prove or anything like that. But I did just think that was notable. I didn't get to see velos, and I will say I started by citing velo. That's literally like the only velo I got a definitive report of this weekend, because they don't have the stadium gun on, and I wasn't trying to snuggle up next to the scouts and be looking over their shoulder the whole time. But I did happen to notice in the first inning that he was 89, 90 a lot. And so I just thought that was notable. Thought I'd mention that. But both guys I thought threw pretty well. Root gave up his one run of the day, was an RBI single from Kuhio Aloy, the little brother of Vahiva Aloy, the transfer from BYU. And he had a really big weekend at the plate. He's starting to hit the ball with some real authority. It honestly took him a couple weeks to settle in. But you see the size, the strength, the athleticism. He has a lot of power to the opposite field. And now he hit an opposite field home run, which we'll touch on later. But his RBI single in the first inning or in the second inning against Root was to the opposite field. It seems like he really can hit the ball with authority the other way, which is always nice to see. After those two pitchers came in, you had Tate McGuire, who is I guess, sophomore because he did pitch an inning or so last year, who had a really good summer in the Cape Cod League. I'm very intrigued by him. Tate McGuire looked awesome in this game. Threw 2 innings, struck out 4, looked really good. Parker Coyle, a veteran arm that you guys know, he also threw, I believe, an inning and 2/3. They had to bring someone in there, freshman Luke Williams, to come close it out for him. A couple other veteran guys threw in this scrimmage. I believe Dylan Carter got some work, Will McIntyre, but Tate McGuire, from a pitching standpoint, I felt like was the story of this scrimmage, because I felt like he's one of those guys in that middle of the pack where you're like, all right, is he going to take a step forward and be a real dude, or is he going to really just be a guy who, like last year, just kind of got lost in the shuffle? If you look at his summer stats and what he did this summer, it seems like he's going to be a guy that really pushes for a role. And so far, early in fall, it seems like he's on track to do just that. Threw really well. I was really pleased with what I saw from him. Threw a ton of strikes, got swings and misses, got some people looking on some pitches too. Just really mixed it up well. Threw 3 pitches for strikes. Really nice to see. And then also in that first scrimmage, you had 2 home runs, which were both 450 feet plus, from Ryder Helfrich and Vahiva Aloy off of freshmen. So a little bit of bullying going on, but still nice to see. Vahiva, I didn't think his was going to stay fair. He just turned on it so quick and it went right at that foul pole. But his, I believe, was like 452 or something like that. And Helfrich, I mean, just you could not barrel up a baseball harder than Ryder Helfrich barreled up that baseball. I believe it was the first pitch of the day thrown by freshman right-hander Tag Andrews. And I think that might be the second time Helfrich has homered off Andrews. So Helfrich, quit bullying the young guys, man. We don't need all that. But moving on to scrimmage number 2. So in this scrimmage, you had Gage Wood and Landon Bidelshis, is I believe how we're going with it. I know it's Bi. It's not B. It's not Bidelshis, which is what I kept saying. And DVH, like me, doesn't know how to pronounce these names. He says just call him Landon, so I might just do that. But I'm referring to the Ohio State transfer left-hander Landon Bidelshis, who, by the way, speaking of velo, was touching 95 last week in his 1 inning of work. I didn't have the numbers in front of me, didn't have a radar gun near me, didn't have my TrackMan iPad set up or anything. But he looked like he's throwing pretty hard. He goes 2 innings, scoreless, struck out 2. Gage Wood gives up a quick run in the first inning, and listen to how he gave it up, guys. So Logan Maxwell leads off, the transfer from TCU, and he hits a base hit, and it was kind of down the right field line. He decides to leg it out for a double, which I think is a common thing that I've been seeing in fall practice, and I think you're going to see from this Arkansas team a lot. They're improved base running wise, but it's not going to be as much, we're stealing bases left and right, which they've done a little bit of that in fall ball. But it's really stuff like that. It's getting that extra 90 feet when you have a chance, putting pressure on teams, forcing them to make plays. Logan Maxwell did a really good job of doing that right out the gate, setting the tone. Legs it out for a stand-up double. Or it wasn't a stand-up double. I don't know why I said that, but a double to start off the afternoon, which is really cool. And then you had Ryder Helfrich bunt him over, and then Souza drives him in with a sack or with a RBI ground out. Like that's small ball, boys. That's what small ball is. And so it's good to see Arkansas flash a little bit of that. And they were doing it against Gage Wood, who is an experienced, high-level arm, really good stuff, throws a lot of strikes. And so that's the kind of guys you're going to have to do that against in the SEC. And that's one run right there. But in the SEC, when you're trying to scratch and claw for every run you get, those are the kind of things you got to do to kind of manufacture offense. And we know Arkansas is going to hit plenty of home runs. We know they have guys that can do a lot of damage. But seeing them do stuff like that early in a scrimmage was pretty cool. Wasn't a super offensive scrimmage, but I did want to touch on a couple guys that really stood out. Big Country, Reese Robinette, just continues to do the damn thing. Hits an opposite field home run off of another lefty, Jack Smith. And I believe it was in a 2-strike count too. The ball was flying out a little bit. Like it got a little bit of help, but it didn't get over by just a few feet. Like it was up there in the hog pen and left on left. That's big time stuff from Reese Robinette. He's had a really solid fall after a really, really good offseason in the summer. playing in the New England League. So good for him, man. Good to see him just continue to be pretty undeniable, man. I feel like he's really worked his way into a legitimate role for this Arkansas offense and this lineup. So that's always good to see. And Zane Becker, who I really think is the backup catcher for Arkansas. Now, Elliot Peterson did finally catch a game the other day. I got to see him catch a game, the JUCO transfer, and so we'll see how he figures into this role. But Zane Becker, I've been really impressed. The freshman, from what he's been doing behind the plate defensively, I feel like he's really well rounded, really good throwing arm, does a good job of handling the staff. Who knows if they're letting him call pitches? I have no idea, and I don't even know how I'd go about trying to evaluate him on that front. But in terms of a freshman catcher, he looks to be a little bit ahead of schedule. He had 2 hits, including a home run in Saturday's scrimmage. So that was good to see. It seems like he's starting to kind of put it together at the plate, behind the plate, all around. Although I do have to mention Zane Becker got yelled at really loudly by Dave Van Horn. Now, this might have actually been on Sunday, but I wanted to touch on it now. Again, there's like 50 people here at these scrimmages, not a huge crowd. Literally everyone in Baum-Walker Stadium the other day could hear as DVH really did not like that Zane Becker was getting too big of a lead there at first base. I believe it was Jay-Woo Cho on the mound, actually. And he tried to pick him off, and he didn't pick him off. They called him safe, but he had a really big lead and like almost kind of caught him leaning a little bit. And DVH really doesn't like that. And it's always funny what warrants a reaction from Van Horn at these scrimmages because, like, you know, there's so many plays going on. You could really sit there and yell at everything if you really wanted to, just because, I mean, there's so much action going on. I mean, 21 innings of baseball this weekend. That was the one play that got like an audible reaction from DVH that everyone could hear. The little things matter, man. And I know that stuff like that drives him crazy. But moving on to scrimmage number 3 real quick. Cole Gilbert, the freshman left-hander who's been really lights out. I mean, he struck out 6 of the 7 guys he had faced coming into his third outing of the fall. Showed some humanity, goes 1 1/3. He gives up a couple runs on a couple hits. Kuhio Aloy, who I mentioned earlier, took him yard, which was a really impressive swing, 400 feet plus to the opposite field. It's really impressive stuff, man. You're starting to see some of the talent that kid has. Maybe I ruled him out as a piece in the lineup too early. And on the other side, the starting pitcher was Ben Bybe, who was really good. Goes 2 innings, gives up an infield hit to Ryder Helfrich, but he works around it. Had 2 strikeouts in the first inning, 2 strikeouts in the next inning, threw a ton of strikes, worked fast. Really looks like he's continuing to just put everything together. I mean, as a sophomore, I felt like he took a noticeable step forward, and it looks like he's done the same thing as a junior. And I will touch on a little bit of the other notable things from the scrimmage number 3. But first, we got to take a quick break. Razorback fans, it is sports season, which means there is no shortage of things for you to bet on, whether it's NFL, college football, fights, MLB still wrapping up here in the next few weeks. And FanDuel is America's #1 sports book, and you can start your season with a big return on FanDuel, which again is America's #1 sports book. So when you get that hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And if you're a live bettor like me, that's something you'll be interested in. I just cannot stop live betting once I start, but it's always so much fun. And with FanDuel, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So again, you sign up today on FanDuel.com, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. It's really hard to beat that offer. And for all you guys that think you know so much about sports, this is your chance to prove it. Make some money. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Okay, real quick, I will touch on the final notes from the scrimmage number 3 before we move on, because I really have a lot I want to say about this Arkansas pitching staff. So again, I touched on Ben Bybe, looked really good, 2 innings, scoreless, 4 strikeouts. It seems like he's gotten better and better each outing. And I mentioned Cole Gibler, who gave up the 2 runs. Not overly concerned about this. This was the first time that we saw him go more than 1 inning. And the second inning was the one he really struggled in. So maybe that's something that they need to work on. And honestly, it reminds me a little bit of what was happening with Gabe Gackle this time last year, where every time he would go for a second or third inning, it was like it would always be like 1 out, too many. And so that's just typical stuff that you see from freshmen. But Rocco Pepe also hit a home run in this scrimmage. He hit a home run off of Ross Felder, the Springdale kid, right-handed pitcher, who honestly looked pretty good until he gave up the home run. I felt a little bit bad for him. Carson Wiggins, who got to throw in this one. This is the first time that I got to see him throw live. because the one scrimmage I missed was the day of the Oklahoma State football game, and he pitched that day. Honestly, got touched up a little bit. Gave up three hits, 2 runs. Carson Rowan jumps on the first pitch of the inning, slaps it through the middle for a single. Vahiva Aloy's little brother, Kuhio Aloy, again with another opposite field base hit that he hit like 107. I mean, he crushed that ball, just a line drive right out of the infield. And then Wiggins comes back with a strikeout against Elliot Peterson, and then Zane Becker, again, the freshman catcher I've been talking about, just rips a line drive that just gets right by the glove of the third baseman. So it's like one of those that like almost was an inning-ending double play. Turns out to be a double down the line that drives in a couple runs. And so, not the greatest of outings from Baby Wiggins, but, good experience for him to go see legitimate SEC pitching, learn how to get some of these guys out. I wouldn't worry about him too much, but I thought that was nice to see from some of these guys in Rowan, Becker, and Aloy, who have not been like the top of the lineup stars. It just kind of shows you the depth of this Arkansas roster. And speaking of depth on this Arkansas roster, Justin Thomas, who I saw today, Perfect Game had him listed as the number 9 JUCO transfer in the country, with Brent Iredale, of course, being number 1 on that list. Justin Thomas, the Florida Southwest JUCO transfer outfielder, who has really been like the number 2 center fielder for Arkansas in these scrimmages, and I feel like is, I don't want to say he's like falling behind in that outfield race, but I just feel like there's been so many guys that have really emerged, like Brenton Clark, the freshman, who, by the way, I didn't mention him in this rundown, but he had a hit in every single scrimmage. Seems like he's had a hit in every scrimmage since we started this whole thing in the fall. He's been kind of undeniable. Justin Thomas hasn't been that, but he did have a home run the other day in scrimmage number 3. Really good to see from him. And he shows plenty of flashes, man. He's a well-rounded guy, really good athlete, has some legitimate power. And so we'll see if he's able to really make a move. But that's pretty much what happened in the 3 scrimmages. Nothing like crazy. Like I said, there's no like big picture takeaways I have of like, this guy's got to be in the lineup after this weekend, or this pitcher is clearly like a star after this weekend. But just really good to again see this sample size grow against this team. I really just enjoy seeing this team be out there with each other. It seems like they like each other. They like playing together, and it's been pretty well-rounded baseball. A lot of good defensive plays, a lot of good base running. The catchers, by the way, so like, they're in these scrimmages, they give them the kind of the green light for the base runners to just run whenever. So you get a lot of attempts and you get a lot of stolen bases, but the catchers have really been shut it down a little bit here lately, kind of fighting back and throwing out some of these base runners. Ryder Helfrich's done a really good job. I feel like you want to talk about guys taking that next step. It seems like Ryder Helfrich is just the well-rounded catcher that we all kind of hoped he would be as a freshman. He appears to be that now. It's been really good to see. So a lot of good positive developments from scrimmage number 3. Again, if you feel like I didn't touch on certain guys enough, hit me up, and I'm glad. I'm always down to talk about this Arkansas baseball team, but we have time constraints, so I'm not going to give you every single play that happened in all these scrimmages. But I've got nothing but real positive things to say for the most part about a lot of these guys, and we can power rank them if you want. And again, if you missed my lineup projection on last week's show, go check that out, because I did kind of break down the hierarchy of sort of where I see things standing at each position. And honestly, my mind hasn't changed a ton after one weekend of scrimmages, but I do want to touch on this pitching staff and a little bit of where I think everything lies. And I put everyone into, I believe it was 5 specific categories. And so we will hear more about that pitching staff and where things stand after one more quick break. Well, guys, it's sports season, which means it's FanDuel season, but that means it's also game time season for you guys that like to go and attend these live sporting events, or if you like to attend concerts, whatever the case may be. Game time ticketing is the number 1 way to do it. It's the best way to consume live content. And Game Time Picks is their new feature that they have, which makes it really easy to know exactly what you're buying, exactly what you're signing up for. They have the all-in pricing. So if you use this feature, it shows the total up front with no surprise fees at checkout. So if you see $78, that's what they're charging you, $78. It's not one of those you click on it and then you find out at the checkout, oh, it's actually different. And with the Game Time Picks toggle on, you also get your seat views. You get to see a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You get the lowest price guarantee, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying. And when you buy tickets with Game Time, download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. I still see tickets for less than $100 for Arkansas A&M this week. So go check that out. Use Game Time. And again, use that code Locked On College for $20 off your purchase. Terms apply. Go check out Game Time today. Okay. Now moving on real quick to the pitching staff, which again, a lot of people have been kind of asking. And look, it's September 23rd is today's date. So there's a lot of time for these things to change. I didn't put every single pitcher on their roster in this list. So if you're the family member of a freshman pitcher and you're like, why didn't he get mentioned or whatever? It just is the way it is. I'm not gonna go through every player on the roster, but I did want to put these guys into a little bit of a category, just so fans can get an idea of kind of what to expect from some of these guys and who might be the guys that you see really helping Arkansas out in SEC play. If I don't mention someone's name, it's not because they're bad or it's not because I don't think they can pitch. It's just kind of the way I view things with this Arkansas pitching staff right now. But we're going to start at the top here, and we're just going to start with the starting rotation because that's what everyone wants to know about. There's not a ton of drama here. Like there's not like 9 guys you got to sort through for this option. I really think it comes down to 5 guys. And really I'm throwing Ben Bybe in that 5 because of how good he's been. I really do think his role is going to end up not being as a starter. I think he's going to be a very important reliever for Arkansas, but I threw him in here just because he's been starting these scrimmages. He started a ton of games in his Arkansas career. And again, if you're just going off of who has looked the best, you could argue Ben Bybe has been the best starting pitcher Arkansas's had in this fall practice. But really, I'm thinking it comes down to, like I said, 5 guys: Gabe Gackle, Zach Root, Landon Bidelshis, whatever the case may be, Landon from Ohio State, Gage Wood, and Ben Bybe. You have 3 games each conference weekend and most weekends throughout the year. You're going to have to narrow that down to 3. Whoever those other 2 guys are that don't get the starting nod, whether that's Wood and Bybe, whether that's Wood and Gackle, whether that's Bybe and Gackle, whether that's Bybe and Root, or whatever it is, whoever those 2 guys are that are not in that starting rotation are going to be massive pieces in the Arkansas bullpen. And so when you kind of think about this whole thing of how this is going to shake out, we got to remember that you have all these really good starting options that not all of them are going to start. And I've kind of been hammering it all offseason that I think Gage Wood is the guy in my brain who I'm like, that should be your like do everything reliever. And I'm sure he wants to start. And you know what? Frankly, it'd be hard to deny him. He's made the progression each year throughout his career. He's been one of Arkansas's most effective starters. I'm sure they will give him that chance, and it'd be hard to argue against it. But I just think about the way that A&M used Evan Ashenbank, who is left-handed, a little bit different. But the way that they would use him, he was their reliever, their top reliever, but he threw like 75 innings where he would close games. He would come in for long relief, mid relief, just whenever they felt like the game was on the line, they would go to Evan Ashenbank. That's kind of how I view Gage Wood. I feel like he has the right mentality, the right skill set to be used in that kind of a role where you maybe after your Friday night starter's done throwing, you use him to close out that game, but he might come back on Sunday and be available for 1 or 2 more. He might have outings where he goes 3 1/3. He might have outings where he goes 1 inning. He might have outings where he goes 4 innings. I feel like he's kind of capable of all that. And I feel like he has the right, again, mentality and skill set for that kind of role. And so, we can argue all day about who should be the starting rotation, but I think we all agree it comes down to these 4 or 5 guys. And, maybe you want to throw Hunter Dietz, who we haven't seen throw yet, or Tate McGuire, who, again, was a really good starter in the Cape Cod League. He has the stuff, mixes speeds, throws a ton of strikes. I think he actually could be a starter, which is kind of crazy. And so we'll see how they end up using him. But I think we agree it comes from this group. And so you can kind of just argue amongst yourselves among who you think those 3 starters should be. But I think we agree that whoever isn't starting from this group is going to be a massive piece in the bullpen. But if we're talking about back end of the bullpen, like potential closing options, I think you got to start with Christian Fouch, which is tough because we have not seen Christian Fouch throw yet. They shut him down in the offseason, and they're being like very careful with him. DVH says he's fine, though. And so until it proven otherwise, I have no reason to believe that he's not fine. But I would like to see him throw maybe by the end of fall. So we'll see if they get him out there. But I feel like Christian Fouch has a good chance to be a closer for Arkansas. I mean, he had a sub-1 ERA last year. I know the strikeout numbers weren't that crazy, but I mean, he throws 101, big righty. I don't think I need to do too much explaining there. He's going to be a closing option. I also think the freshman Cole Gibbler, who I said, showed his first little bit of humanity the other day. I think he's going to have a good chance to be a big piece for Arkansas in the back end of that bullpen. I don't think they're going to use him the way they used Gackle as kind of the 2-3 inning into the game reliever that you go multi innings with and use him twice a weekend. Like, I don't think they're going to use him as much as they use Gackle, or even as much as they used Tiger a couple years ago, or some of these other freshman arms, like even Gage Wood in 2023 that they've used heavily. Hopefully with Gibbler, they don't have to force him into anything like that, and he can be just a 1-2 inning guy. But I think Cole Gibbler is going to have a very good chance to help Arkansas at the back end of the bullpen. A couple other guys that I put in here with like a little asterisk next to their name because I feel like they also really fit more into other categories. But I put Hunter Dietz, who again closed games for Arkansas last year before he went down with an injury. Is clearly has the stuff to be a back end of the bullpen type of guy. And I threw Will McIntyre in there because he's closed games before in pretty much every year of his Arkansas career. And he's, got the right mentality. He can do that. And he's really just the guy you throw in that can clean up a bunch of different messes. And so I threw Will McIntyre into that with an asterisk because I really think he falls into this next category, our third category, which is multi-inning options. And these are guys that I feel like you can throw them in at any situation and they can just eat innings for you. 2, 3, 4, whatever the case may be. Maybe your starter has a bad outing. You need someone to just go in with one out in the fourth inning and eat up a few. These are guys I feel like that fit that category, fit that criteria, and can be somewhat of long relievers. I've got Parker Coyle, the left-handed guy from Springdale. Actually, he's not from Springdale, is he? Is he from Springdale? No, it's Cooper Dossett, who's from Springdale, who may or may not be injured. But Parker Coyle is a guy. He's from Edmond, Oklahoma. That's where he's from. But he's been around for a while, got some experience, has kind of fit into this type of role before. He looks like a better version of the guy he was last year, which, helped Arkansas in this kind of role. Will McIntyre is, of course, in this role. He's a guy that we've seen him have 1-inning outings in his career. We've seen him have 7-inning outings in his career. We've seen him throw a complete game before. So really anything between 1 to 9 innings is in play with Will McIntyre. So I think he certainly fits in this criteria. Tate McGuire is another guy that I think fits in this criteria because I said he mixes speeds, throws a tons of different pitches, has been throwing a lot of strikes. I think is a guy you can stretch out a little bit and kind of use as almost like a second starting option, like that you backpack with a starter, something like that. And Dylan Carter's another one who in that 2023 season before he went down was on pace to throw like 55, 60 innings. Like they were using him a lot. And again, hopefully they don't have to use him or overuse him like that, I should say. But I think Dylan Carter's a guy that you can count on. Ton of experience, throws a lot of strikes, can kind of be an inning eater for you. But this next group, as the fourth group we have for these pitchers, I have them as X factors, where I'll be honest with you, I don't really know what to do with this group of people because some of them are coming back from injuries. Some of them are young. You just don't really know what you have, but I feel like they're X factors who could really change up all three of those first three groups that I listed off there. And I'm looking at Colin Fisher, who was Arkansas's midweek starter, who had a really promising start to his freshman season, the left-hander, before he went down with an injury. I feel like he's a guy that could be in that midweek starting role. I mean, we saw him start on a weekend for his first ever appearance for Arkansas. So, they like him. Hunter Dietz, I feel like also is in this category as the most talented player in Arkansas's recruiting class last year. But we got to see throw a few innings there. He should be back by Christmas time. And so I'm hoping both of those guys can help Arkansas in some form or fashion. It's just kind of TBD because we haven't seen them throw yet this season to see kind of what role they're going to be able to fill. But they're both really talented arms that I imagine are going to be in there in some form or fashion. It's just a matter of if it's more of a back end, more as a starter, more as a mid reliever. Like we'll see. Another guy that I have as a X factor is Carson Wiggins, the true freshman, who, again, hasn't gone like super well for him in these scrimmages, but it's very early, a ton of talent. And we see it happen every year. These guys that in scrimmages, maybe not look that great. I would even throw Gabe Gackle in that category. And then the lights come on and you're like, oh yeah, this guy throws 97. Of course he's going to help us. I think Carson Wiggins fits that kind of criteria. I don't want to pencil him in for any specific role, but I think he's definitely got the stuff and the makeup to help Arkansas on the mound. No doubt about that. And Josh Heineman is the last guy I have in this one because I just don't know what to do with him, man. I mean, he's been around for a few years, but he has not made his actual collegiate debut yet. He's been banged up. He's been hurt. And then, was in his freshman year was kind of buried, beneath all these talented arms. He's back. He's healthy. He's been throwing pretty well in these scrimmages, throwing a lot of strikes. I like what I've seen from Josh Heineman. I'm actually a believer that he can really help Arkansas in a real meaningful way this year. But he's another one where coming off an injury, I don't know what that role is going to look like. I would imagine they're not going to want to lean on him for 50, 60 innings in his first year back from injury. But I really think he can help Arkansas, and we'll see if it's more of a situational thing. But I think all four of those guys, I think they have the stuff to help Arkansas. I just don't know what real category to put them into. And a couple of them could fit into our next category, which is our final one, our fifth and final one. It's titled left-handed. These guys that I'm about to list off, unequivocally, without a doubt, are left-handed. Luke Williams, freshman, thrown a lot. I've been impressed with what I've seen by him. He's actually looked pretty good to me. Feel like he could be useful in situations. Tucker Holland, really big recruit last year. Didn't have a great offseason before he ended up getting hurt before the season actually started. He's back, real big kid, left-handed. Came in for a big situation and got Nolan Souza out the other day. So that kind of shows you the kind of role they potentially might see him in. Would love to see him take that next step forward as a, I guess, redshirt freshman because he didn't throw last year. Tucker Holland, left-handed, unequivocally. Jackson Farrell, another left-handed freshman, had some nice moments here in the scrimmages, could be in that type of role. And the last one, Jack Smith, again, left-handed, which is why I have him in this category, which is titled left-handed. Fastball gets up to 95, 96. He will walk you. He will walk a lot of guys. I feel like he's almost on a Jake Faraday type of career arc where it's like you see him as a freshman, you're like, oh, he can clearly help. Oh, but he's a little bit too wild right now. And he's a little bit less wild than he was last year. We'll see if he just kind of continues to make that progress and be less and less wild. But he's got the stuff to help Arkansas like right now. So I won't be surprised if he does. And guys, that's all I got for you today. I actually went a little bit above my allotted time. But I appreciate you guys for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that breakdown of the pitching staff. If you have any questions, I'm always here to answer them. So drop a comment, leave a like, subscribe, whatever you got to do. Reach out to me on Twitter, and I will be happy to talk Arkansas baseball with you. Can't wait to do it again. I believe I will be back Friday. Curtis and I will be doing a little bit of a split episode. But I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am Andrew Ellis, and you have a great day, everyone.